The day is December 26, 2008. 8 days had passed since the 6-month truce between Israel and Hamas. Each day I traveled in Israel, more and more mortars were launched by Hamas from the Gaza Strip into southern Israel. I had been staying at the cheapest hostel in Jerusalem, 48 miles from the Gaza Strip. There I met these adventure travelers who specialized in traveling to conflict zones. They swapped stories about traveling in Afghanistan, North Korea, and Iran. Outside the hostel, I'd seen many Israeli soldiers going to the Western Wall in the Old City for the start of Hanukkah. Legions of their army green bags were stacked in huge piles outside Zion Gate. I saw young soldiers sitting on top of these piles, smoking, with their M16 rifles swung over their shoulders. Even though these soldiers were in Jerusalem, the holy city for Hanukkah, they did not look happy. Little did I know that the Israel-Gaza War of 2008-2009 would start exactly 19 hours after I left Israel. Here's my story of how I left Israel and the 7 checkpoints I had to go through. Checkpoint 1. I spent Christmas in Bethlehem. Leaving Bethlehem, there was a Dutch documentary film crew in front of me. The town has big cement walls with guard towers surrounding it. From the outside, it looks more like a prison than the birthplace of Jesus. Inside, the walls are lined with Banksy paintings and other political artwork by street artists. I followed the Dutch film crew through a steel fenced area that looks like something you'd run cattle through. The first security gate consisted of an 18-year-old girl who was a Palestinian Authority soldier sitting behind bulletproof glass. She waved me and the other tourists right through the gate. Checkpoint 2. I was now on the other side of the Israel security barrier around Bethlehem, but there was a long line of nearly 50 tourists in front of me waiting to get through, and it was at a standstill. Israeli soldiers were patting down every person trying to get through and searching their bags. After about 15 minutes of standstill, tour guides and bus drivers on the other side were talking loudly and gesticulating. And after a while, the guards relented and they let a new line open up, and the Israeli guard behind the blast-proof window waved us all through, the Israelis, Palestinians, and visitors like me. I was flying back to Scotland because I was studying at University Edinburgh, where I could get free medical treatment in the UK thanks to their socialized medicine. Had I gone back to the US as a graduate student, I had no medical insurance for treatment. So before continuing, let me give you a little more context to the story. So I left Petra Hostel Christmas Eve to go to Bethlehem, and I was starting to feel ill from what I thought was food poisoning. But as the hours wore on, I got more and more sick. And weeks later, I found out that what I was suffering from was actually a combination of real nasty stomach virus. It was Giardia, Campylobacter, and Entamoeba histolytica. It's very bad stuff. So I didn't know this at the time. All I knew was that I had diarrhea and food poisoning. And I asked myself, how many more times in the future am I going to be in Bethlehem on Christmas? I got to do this. So this foolishness landed me in a Palestinian ER on Christmas Day because I was so dehydrated. My stomach hurt so much that I stopped drinking liquids or eating. I needed to get to a real hospital ASAP. Checkpoint 3. The taxi I hailed whizzed away from Bethlehem, and soon we were passing through Jerusalem. In my semi-coherent weekend state, I sat in the rear, sipping my 1.5-liter bottle of Sprite while my stomach gurgled. I took in the scenery from the highway as we went by the Golden Dome of the Rock, and then we went through Jerusalem and we climbed up the hills on the other side. Bethlehem is only 6 miles south of Jerusalem. Ben Gurion Airport in Tel Aviv is only 31 miles from Jerusalem. I was outside the range of rocket fire, but in California terms, the Gaza Strip wasn't that far, just 45 miles away. I heard low-flying Israeli jets above. Soaring up the mountains west of Jerusalem, I enjoyed the green hills. Coming from the desert, these hills seemed almost too green and artificial. Soon we descended and reached sea level. Several miles from Tel Aviv airport, we reached a road checkpoint that looked like a toll plaza. An Israeli guard came over to my window. I handed my passport. He goes around to the back. He checks the trunk for bombs. And then he sees, it's all clear. And then he gives a hand signal, and we're on our way. So checkpoint 4. To get into the airport terminal, you have to first put your bag on a table and open it for a guard to search it. The guard asks simple questions like, where you came from, where you're going, and then you pass a walk-through metal detector. After this, I was finally in the Tel Aviv airport. Checkpoint 5. Lufthansa and another German airline are the only airlines that are on the bottom floor of the Tel Aviv airport. So approaching the ticket counter, I was cut off by 4 young and attractive women dressed like law clerks. The leader of the group said in English with a mild Hebrew accent, "I have to ask you questions to make sure you do not have a bomb in your bag, or someone else placed one in your bag to blow up the plane." She said this very matter-of-factly, like this was a completely normal way to start a conversation. Feeling very ill, but knowing that these are not the type of situation to joke around, I said frankly, "No, I do not have a bomb in my bag. And I can open it right now to show you. It's just a bunch of dirty clothes in a sleeping bag." She took out her hand immediately and said, "No, keep it closed. I have more questions." She went into me rapid fire like a prosecutor, asking me about the nature of my visit to Israel, where I stayed, where I came from just now, who took me to the airport, what airline I'm taking back, where I'm going to, where's my ticket, and why does my bottle of Sprite have Arabic writing on it instead of Hebrew? It was like a cross-examination, and I hadn't even reached the ticket counter. She was very paranoid, even more so than a TSA agent in the US. I answered all of her questions. She took my passport and returned a few minutes later, placing a small sticker with Hebrew characters on the back of my passport. I walked through the empty line and gave my backpack to the next guard, who passed it through the largest bag scanner I've ever seen. It was the size of a school bus. It looked like you could detonate a bomb inside. My bag came out fine, and I proceeded to the ticket counter where I chatted up the Lufthansa ladies in blue with their funny yellow German scarves. Checkpoint 6. After getting my ticket, I headed upstairs, and we went through an ordinary security checkpoint that everyone has to go through with a ticket. And this was very similar to any airport check you go through in the US. Checkpoint 7. The final checkpoint, Israel, was the most difficult. After going through 6 checkpoints just to leave Israel, I was exhausted and at my sickest with the stomach virus. I was coherent, but not all there. My stomach was in a lot of pain and I felt feverish. I didn't think leaving Israel would be a problem because entering it was very easy for me. I took a flight from Manchester, England to Tel Aviv 9 days earlier, and I was perhaps the only non-Jewish person on the flight. The passport control officer then quickly scanned my American passport, looked at my UK student visa, and then stamped it and handed it right back to me. However, leaving Israel was another story. I gave my US passport to this Aryan-looking woman at the passport control station. She had sleek hair with bronze-rimmed Armani glasses. She spoke in very thick Hebrew accent, and I had to ask her to repeat what she was saying a couple times before I understood what she was asking.
"What is your father's name?"
I thought this was a very odd question. I said my father and his father were both named Milton Werner. I thought this was a bizarre thing to ask, but maybe it had something to do with my German last name, Werner. She typed into her computer, perhaps doing a search against a Nazi archive. She said she was doing an ancestry check. I told her my great-grandparents moved from Germany to the United States in the late 1800s, and my grandfather, Milton Werner, was a retired lieutenant colonel in the U.S. Army. He fought for the United States against the Axis powers as a B-24 bomber pilot under the Flying Tigers, and he passed away in 2007. After a couple minutes of running my passport through her computer, another female control officer came over from a nearby office, took my passport, had me sit down on the bench in the rear of the passport control station. After a while longer, a male African-Israeli security guard came out and asked me, "It's Milton Werner, correct? The name of your grandfather?" "Yes, Milton Werner, like my middle name," I responded. I wasn't worried or afraid. I was just a bit confused as to why they wouldn't trust my word and think my grandfather a Nazi. I also wondered what type of information they were expecting to get from me, a 24-year-old student from America at Israeli passport control. After about 20 more minutes, the head passport control officer came out, handed me my passport, and told me I was free to go to my gate. Finally free, I made it back to the United Kingdom, and I was able to see a doctor in Scotland that night who put me on the road to recovery. Thank you.